Hi, and welcome to Women of Worth Wednesday. Today is July 24th, which here in Utah is a state holiday. It's Pioneer Day. And I'm Ganel-Lyn, your producer and host of Women of Worth. Welcome to High Five Life. We love this community, and we hope that you'll comment where you're watching from if you're watching this live with us. I've been pondering about the message for today because it's Pioneer Day here in the state of Utah. I wanted to share one of my favorite pioneer stories, and as always, I want to try to connect with the scriptures and with women. And so I think today is going to be exactly what I needed as a reminder. And so my prayer to you is that you will be reminded and be able to share this message of love and appreciation for the women of worth that are in your life, and maybe some men of worth as well, because I think this is a both kind of message today. So one of my favorite pioneer stories or messages happened in 1863. It's the first group of pioneers to come to Panguitch here in Utah. And they came to Panguitch from Parowan under the leadership of Jens Nielsen. And they followed a route over the rugged Bear Valley part of the Spanish Trail. They had planted crops, but the season was short, and they didn't have a harvest like they needed. And the winter of 1864 to 1865 was super, super cold. The snow was really deep, and the closest supplies for this community was over 115 miles to the north of them in Gunnison. So if you're familiar with Utah, Panguitch, Parowan, and Gunnison. If you're not, then look it up on a map. So it gives you some perspective of where we're talking. Over 40 miles to the west was the Bear Valley Road to Parowan. So they were isolated. They were low on supplies. It had been a harsh winter. So 7 men set out to leave Panguitch to go to Parowan to get flour and food for this starving colony. And as they head over Bear Valley, they have to abandon 2 of their yoke of oxen and lighten the wagon because the snow was so deep. They proceeded on foot, but as they were walking on foot, the process that they could make was over this frozen, crusted snow. And they kept struggling to stay on and not sink down into the snow. For those snowshoers out there, you'll know why snowshoes are handy to have around if you're walking over 100 miles from Panguitch to Parowan. So the only way that they could make it over the snow was they laid down quilts. And maybe this part of the story is familiar to you. They laid down the quilts that they had with them, and they would walk to the end, and then they would relay the next quilt and lay it down again and walk again. And this is what they did all the way to Parowan. This story was related, and they began, this is what Alexander Matheson, who was part of the 7 group, said. We decided that if we had faith as big as a mustard seed, we could make it. And we could bring flour to our starving families. So we began the quilt laying in prayerful earnestness. The return trip was harder with the weight of the flour, but we finally made it to our wagon and oxen and on home with thankfulness to the Lord for his goodness. The whole settlement was so happy and grateful because this group of 7 men had been gone much longer than they had expected, and they were starving. Their prayers and tears and fears were then replaced with rejoicing and cheers. Don't you love that story? The reason I wanted to share it today on Women of Worth is because these men were wonderful. They had faith like a mustard seed. They were prayerful. They were determined to take care of their friends, their families, and they were inspired to take these quilts and make a way. But what has really touched me is who were the women that had made those quilts. In this time, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and assume that it was women that had quilted these quilts, because that's just the culture and way back in the 1800s, the mid 1800s. And so my heart has been turned towards these women who were struggling as well. And the stories I hear of quilters during the middle 1800s is they would use scraps of cloth and clothes that had worn out and try to make these quilts. And I think so often of what we do that is kind of the maintaining or monotony of our daily lives. It's the same laundry, it's the same grocery stores, it's the same vacuuming, it's the same dishes we wash, and the same bills that we pay, the same lawns that we mow, the same diapers that we change day after day after day. And so often we do these monotonous chores, and they're the part of our mortal experience. And we don't think of them as sacred work. And I've come to know that everything that we do is sacred. I've shared on a previous Women of Worth my feelings about how sacred it is to change diapers. And I have come to know specifically that the adversary attacks women in very unique ways. And because this is Women of Worth, I want to emphasize that the adversary tries to get us to believe that our bodies are not enough, our work is not enough, our efforts day in, day out of sewing and shopping and cleaning and helping our children learn to read and running errands is not enough, that it's not changing the world, that you need to, create an Etsy store, cure cancer, build a school in Africa to really make an impact in the world. And that if you're a woman of great worth, then you're going to be doing these kinds of notable things. And I believe that these women that sewed these quilts had no idea that they were sewing quilts that would save lives, not just the lives of these 7 men, because what if they weren't able to cross and they were stuck out there, but the women and men and children that were saved because the food and supplies were able to make it back to their small community. I am not a quilter. I'm not a seamstress, but I've done a lot of laundry, and right now you can probably hear my washing machine upstairs running. And I was thinking about how often we need to be reminded that the daily chores, the daily small acts that only God sees is really a sacred work, and that God is able to consecrate all that we do for our good and for the good of those around us. It made me think of 2 women specifically that have worked with laundry to help bless the lives of others. One is my sweet mom. I hope she's watching. For many years, she would do the laundry of missionaries every week in our small little town in Northern California, Yuba City. Shout out to anyone watching from there. And I always knew my mom did that. I always knew that she made time in her chore list and her busy schedule to serve the missionaries in this way, and she would do their laundry. Fast forward, my own son went on a mission to Africa. He's been home about 7 months. Sorry, I'm so weepy today. And there was an area of his mission where he was hitting that mark where there was some fatigue and struggle. And it's not always easy on a mission. You don't always get companions you do well with. You don't always feel like you're being a successful missionary. And he was put in an area for a small period of time. Previous to that, he had been washing his laundry in a bucket. And he was in an area where a sweet sister in the ward, a Zimbabwe sister that I love, would do the missionaries' laundry every week. And she became much more of than just the someone that helped with laundry, but a mama to him. But it was a blessing to me because she also was on social media on Facebook, and so she would send me periodic pictures, which just a few months ago there was very limited conversations, 2 times a year phone calls, and not a lot of people in Zimbabwe are on Facebook, and that was such a blessing. And it felt like this full circle that my mama had helped all of these missionaries, not really me helping them, but my mom had, and now my son was being helped and served in a really tender way. So my message to you today is just like the sister in the New Testament, Dorcas. If you were studying Come Follow Me a few weeks ago, I think it is chapter, let me see here. I want to make sure that I get it right. I had it open and then it moved. Oh, chapter 9. Dorcas is, it says to her that she has died. And as Peter approaches, the people are crying. The widows are weeping, because it says of Dorcas in chapter 9, verse 39, that they were weeping and they were ripping their clothes and garments because Dorcas had made them. That this sweet little seamstress, Dorcas, had made such an impact on this community simply because of her skills to sew. And as her body laid there, Peter raised her from the dead. But she was beloved because of this gift and talent that she had shared and all the clothes that she had made for this community. I hope that this message, whether you're a seamstress or not, whether you're a quilter or not, maybe you're just doing laundry like me, maybe you have other skills in your life that you think are just not that big of a deal. They're not changing the world in any way. I hope somehow through the Spirit you are reminded that you are blessing the world. Every time you make those peanut butter jelly sandwiches, every time you do those dishes, every time you go to the grocery store again for the 3rd time that week, every time you start a load of laundry, fold another load of laundry and put them away, you are building the kingdom of God on earth. And like these beautiful pioneer women that had sewed these quilts, not knowing beforehand what good it would bring to their community, I hope that today the Lord will bring to mind for you, a woman of great worth or a man of great worth, some small way in which you have touched someone else's life through your small offering. Maybe you need that reminder today, and maybe only the Spirit can comfort you and remind you that you are of great worth and that you are changing the world simply by showing up and serving in the small ways that we don't even notice, that just go about our lives each day doing. And I hope that today, especially on this Pioneer Day, we'll be reminded of the great sacrifices of the pioneers, but also what we're doing to pioneer, whether we're pioneering the gospel in Zimbabwe or we're pioneering it in our own families, because we are the last that are still trying to attend church and live the gospel, and it gets hard. Whatever way in which you're pioneering, I hope that you'll see those small things that you're doing every day make such a difference. Thank you for joining us today here on High Five Live and on Women of Worth. I'm so grateful for this community of faith. And I'm so grateful to hear how these messages of hope and faith have blessed your lives. And so I hope that you'll share that as well, and share this message with someone. Maybe you know a quilter or a seamstress that needs to be reminded of Dorcas and the women of Pangwitch and how they have impacted your life. And maybe you just need to be reminded yourself today that you're loved and that you are of great worth.